Hello! So today I thought I would share with you guys the 7 books that I read in June. I read 4 physical books and 3 ebooks, making that a grand total of 7, which was a pretty successful reading month for me. I'm not a particularly fast reader. I feel like I'm just average pace, and as you can see, my reading interests are pretty varied, so you really never know what I'll be reading month to month, which is fun and exciting, keeps you on your toes, I suppose. I'm going to start with the physical books that I read, and then I'll talk about the ebooks next. Also, this is Clementine, and she will often be in the background. The bed is her favorite place in the whole entire world to lay, so she will definitely always be somewhere nearby. We have emotional attachment issues with each other. We don't like to be very far apart or separated for very long. But anyway, let's get into it. The first physical book that I read this month was The War of Two Queens by Jennifer Armentrout. This is the 4th book in the From Blood and Ash series. It was really good. I've read a lot of criticisms, and I had heard that the series tends to fall off after the 3rd book, but I didn't really find that to be the case. I think it's really important to make sure that you're reading the prequel series along with the Blood and Ash series. I just found a graphic on Pinterest one day. I think I was searching for like fan art and it popped up, and I was like, that makes sense. So I've been following that, and it's really helped in terms of the story building and the plot and everything flowing together really well. I didn't feel like there were any gaps or any like holes with the plot or what was happening, or that it was just a bunch of random things that wasn't making any sense. There are some other criticisms about something that happens with our 3 main characters, and some feelings of there being potentially like emotional cheating and things like that. And I personally just didn't feel that. I feel like the relationship between the 3 main characters is very special and unique, and so all of that was something that I just had expected and felt was going to happen very early on in the series. So I enjoyed it. I really recommend it, and I definitely am looking forward to reading more in the series. The next book that I read was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and I really hope I'm saying her name right, and if I'm not, please kindly correct me, because I will definitely be reading more from her. This was my first one, and I want to make sure that I say her name right. But it tells the story of 2 doctors. The first one is named Brianna, and she is just in a horrible state of life. She her divorce is getting finalized. She wants this promotion at work and finds out that this other new doctor, of course he's a man too, might be in the running for it, and her brother desperately needs a new kidney. So she's got all of this stress on her. And then Jacob, who's the other doctor and the one who she thinks is going to steal her promotion that pretty much should be handed to her right from her. Jacob has really difficult social anxiety, and just genuinely makes a really bad first impression. And so he decides to write Brianna a letter just explaining what happened, and he's not a bad guy, and they begin writing letters. Excuse me. But they begin writing letters back and forth to each other, and the banter is really sweet. There's a little bit of fake dating in there, which is a trope that I really enjoy, like when they're holding hands and they're both just like, oh, I have the butterflies, but I can't show it because this is pretend. I don't know. I just eat that up. It's so good. I love Emily Henry, and I feel like this is probably as close as you can get to that kind of rom-com style of romance book that still has so much depth to it without it actually being her. I adored it, and I will definitely be reading more by this author very soon. The next physical book that I read was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I feel like everyone has read this book or has it on their TBR. I loved it. I was no exception to the hype. It tells the story of a young girl named Iris. She is a writer for a newspaper, and she has this competition going with one of her coworkers named Roman. Her brother is gone fighting a war, so there are these factions, kind of. I think that would be the best way to describe it, and there are gods that rule So her brother was called to the war to fight. There are two gods that are warring one another. And her mom is not very reliable. She has a lot of stress and she feels very isolated and very lonely. So she starts trying to write letters to her brother, which unfortunately are not going to him, like he's not receiving them, and she's not receiving a response. So she's still writing him letters on her typewriter, and she puts them under her wardrobe door and they disappear. And eventually someone starts writing back. That just kind of scratches the surface of what this book is about. And I don't want to give too much away, but it is just sweet. I think that would be the best way to describe it. It's just a very sweet story. I did give it 4 stars instead of 5 stars just because I needed a little bit more of the world building and the war and the gods and things like that, but I've heard that is a lot more prominent in the next book, so I'm really looking forward to it too. The next book that I read was Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I read this for Pride Month, and I think this was the first classic that I had read this year, which is kind of sad. I used to kind of exclusively read just the classics, but I don't know, I need a lot of happiness in my life. So I need all like the romantasy and romance and happy endings that I could have. But this is set in the 1950s in Paris. It tells the story of a young man who begins sharing a room with a young man named Giovanni, and they form a romance to one another. The man is engaged to a woman who's currently out of country, and she's deciding if she wants to like marry him and be with him. Again, that just kind of scratches the surface of what this book's about. A few pages into it, it actually tells you like the big plot twist or kind of the big event that happens in the end. So you spend the whole book just kind of waiting to find out what happens and how the characters got to this point. It was really beautiful, but also really heavy and sad. I think there are definitely some trigger warnings, and it's very interesting to get into the main character's head and the conflictions that he has between his fiance and Giovanni, who he both loves, but in different ways, and his issues with the morality. He wants to be a good boy. He kind of had some childhood trauma and things like that. I don't know. It's so short. The book is not even 200 pages long, but there is so much depth to it, and I don't know. I just feel like it's one of those books that everyone should read because it makes such an impact. Now moving on to the 3 ebooks that I read. So I finished the Chestnut Spring series by Elsie Silver. So I read Reckless, which is Winter and Theo's story. I think that this might have been my favorite one of them all. I don't know why, but it was just so good. I don't know, it was really sweet and fun. So Winter is a doctor and she's recently divorced. There is a little bit of like trigger warnings that you probably would want to check into with that before you dive too far in, but she's kind of known for being cold and unapproachable and unlikable, hence kind of Winter. And then she is falling in love with Theo, who is a little bit younger than her, a little bit more reckless, and he is a bull rider. I didn't think that like cowboy romance would be like the niche like romance genre that I would fall into and get into, but it is apparently. But I don't know, it was just really good, and I enjoy their story so much. One thing I really like about Elsie's books is that there isn't like a third act breakup or a lot of unnecessary drama with the characters. They just have, difficulties and disagreements and issues in their relationship, and they communicate and work out, and I don't know, I really enjoy reading that. And then I read Hopeless, which is Beau's story. I really enjoyed it as well, but not as much just because I don't know if the couple would make it long term, and that always takes it away from me a little bit. Characters are kind of trying to create a new life for themselves other than the one that has been forced upon them by the town's expectations or their family's expectations, and they kind of help each other find that. This also has an element of fake dating in it, which I really love, and I think that out of all 5 of the book is probably the spiciest. But It was good, and I just cannot wait to read more of Elsie Silver's writing. I enjoy it so much. I just think the characters are really defined, and it's fun, and I love the found family and how all the characters tie in. So when you have a favorite character or a favorite couple, you see them again and again, which is really wonderful. And lastly, the ebook that I read was Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. This tells the story of the Greek heroine Atalanta. She was known for being extremely strong and swift. She goes on this kind of crusade with men and makes a name for herself. A lot more. The storytelling was actually very accurate to the Greek myth. I read a few different interpretations from it. So it wasn't that the story wasn't accurate that was the problem for me. I just found the character of Atalanta to be very wishy-washy. You would have pages where she would be like, I'm strong and tough and I don't need men, and then she's kind of like choosing to intertwine herself with men, which, not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm obviously a big romance reader, but it just didn't make sense, and it just seemed like so many of the things that happened to Atalanta, it just didn't make sense. I don't know, it was irritating to me. It didn't feel very I don't know, it wasn't for me. Sorry. I have seen and heard a lot of other things about this author, so I definitely want to give them another try in the future, but it might be a little bit. But anywho, that is what I read this month. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to me babble on about books, and feel free to leave any recommendations or anything like that below, and I guess I will see you next time. Bye.